will, or normative ways of thinking that say you ought to believe or you ought to think, it can be easily exploited. That's the first. But second is that I really believe in this context, it is very important to negate the paradigm of Puritanism or the paradigm of supremacists by manifesting a contra paradigm. And what I mean by this is that fundamentally the Puritans essentialize the American. I mean, they essentialize the American. The American becomes not a human being with all types of nuances and complexities and layers. The American becomes a caricature, an archetype of an invader or a crusader or whatnot. And to the extent that anyone in the military stereotypes and transforms the Iraqi or the Afghani or the Muslim into a caricature, they're feeding into the same paradigm. I mean, they're becoming a part of the problem, not a part of the solution. And you know, I have to say this, that for instance, the Muslim world became very cognizant of the fact that the military uses the word haji, referring to, and that is becoming a part of the problem because it's a caricature, it's a stereotype, it's an essentialism that seems to basically say, well, listen, if these people are essentializing us, so why do you blame us that we essentialize them? The United States, I don't believe that the military victory is the issue in either Afghanistan or Iraq as much as the moral victory. Either the United States, either we are going to be defeated morally or we're going to be victorious morally. And if ultimately we go in and contribute to the collective scars, if we go in and engage in the same type of dogmatic, essentialistic, fanatical, extremist thinking and attitudes of those who are on the other side, then ultimately it's a moral defeat because the rest of the Muslim world, not just Iraqis and Afghanis, are sitting there watching these two parties, the allies of the U.S. and then the allies of the various groups, militant groups opposed to the U.S. or the West, and they're trying to see if one of them is morally better than the other.
You know, a lot of times for the U.S. and for the Americans, one of the things that goes hand in hand with the way we approach is to come in believing that democracy is a morally superior form of governance. Is that the best card to lead with?
No, in fact, I mean, it is very important not to forget, and this is, there's no way to emphasize this sufficiently, that a country like Afghanistan has had a very long history with invaders, which it ultimately, by the way, defeated again and again. It defeated the British invaders, for example, twice. It defeated the Russians before the Soviets, and it has a long history of reacting to those who come, foreign elements that come to their own culture. And Iraq is a cradle of civilization. At one time, the leader of the whole Muslim world. At one time, the capital of the civilized world. So it's very important when you deal with to remember that you are coming in by virtue of the fact that you don't speak Arabic. You mostly belong to another religion, Christian. For the most part, you've come in at the wake of a military engagement. You're coming in and fundamentally suspect position. That, I don't think there's any way to avoid that or to beat around it. Your position is suspect because all of these countries, all Muslim countries, had previous experiences with British colonialism, which proved to be very exploitative, was French colonialism, was Dutch colonialism, Italian colonialism, all of which proved to be very exploitative. Now, fundamentally, what we're doing today is we're coming in and saying, we are not crusaders. We're coming in, we're not there to spread the word of Christ, to make Christ supreme in the Muslim world. We're not there because we believe that Muhammad was an evil man and a heretic, and we must wipe out this spawn of the devil, if you will, which the attitude that the Crusaders used to have. And we're not coming in as colonizers who plan to basically turn your country into a colony where we exploit the natural resources and treat you as second-class or third-class people. We're coming in actually to help you. Now, so the claim is a claim about credibility. You're either believed or you're not believed. Your enemies will cite any breach, any failure, any parallel to past invaders, past exploitations to say, look, they don't have credibility, don't believe them. Fundamentally, whether you have credibility or not, it is completely the wrong attitude to believe that, well, I don't have credibility because these people are crazy or because their religion tells them not to believe us and there's nothing we can do about that. Because if that is really the way you believe, then you have no business being in Iraq or in Afghanistan. If you truly believe that these people don't want your help, don't welcome your help, don't want anything from you, and they're just fundamentally and inherently incapable of believing you or accepting you, then you have no business being there. But the fact that you are there means that you are saying, by your very presence there, believe us. Don't fight us because we have something, we're not coming in as invaders or colonizers, we're coming in as something else. And that credibility battle, I think it is the crux of the matter. The Puritans or the fanatics and extremists, it's no accident that at the time, before the United States invaded Afghanistan, and people were saying, well, the United States is going to have a hard time and so on, I actually told people, Afghanistan is going to fold like a deck of cards. Why? Because the Taliban and Al-Qaeda had no credibility among the Afghani population. The Afghanis looked at the Taliban and Al-Qaeda as foreign and as exploitative and as demeaning and as degrading and as dangerous. And therefore, they did not put up a fight. And neither have the Iraqis for the most part, when they could have. And if they would have, our job in both countries would have been much, much harder. Much, much harder. Now, the crux of the matter is that we don't suddenly start giving people reason to say, well, you know, the Taliban or the Qaeda or Saddam Hussein, if not better, then at least they were not worse than this. And that, if that happens, and if it happens at a large enough scale, then by definition, it's just a matter of time before we lose this whole interaction. You know, even if we win the battle, we lose the ultimate war, the strategic engagement itself. And every single soldier, leave alone a commander, is really an ambassador for the United States. It's like they really go in with a very heavy responsibility upon their shoulders. they are ambassadors for this. That's why they're also real heroes if they live up to this charge. Because if they fail, they are really betraying the trust of what this whole civilization stands for. But if they live up to it, they're heroes because they've proven a point that we are not locked as human beings. We're not locked in religious wars forever. Clash of civilizations, clash of Christianity versus that. They've proved those who constantly imagine Islam and Christianity by definition being at each other's throats wrong, and they're coming in and saying, no, we are living proof that there is something higher. There's a humanism that makes us all, that encompasses us all and unites us all, and we recognize that. And that's, if you're a religious person, I believe that that's great in the sight of God. And if you're not religious, that's great in the sight of humanity. And to the extent that there's greatness, that there's also the failure of greatness, which could be very serious indeed.
Dr. Abou El Fadl, thank you very much.
It was my pleasure, and I hope it does good.
Yes, it will do good. Thank you.
Okay.
If we would just stay right where we are, just a couple minutes.
Can you go down to look?
He's just gonna get a little wider shot of the two of you talking,
There's gonna be another
and then we'll be
chair
all finished.
that he has.
I
I'd
thought
like
that
to put
was
the
a-
chaplain in that chair, the one that doesn't
You
have
made
a
a
high
nice
back.
connection there at the end with the.
You just walk straight ahead, you'll,
I can't get out.
we're locked in.
That's,
We'll not do that more, but
fundamentally
we'll have to
what-
walk around.
I knew that the Iraqis will not put up a fight,
Thank you.
and they will not do it with Afghanis.
The conventional.
We are almost, we just have
Yeah,
one more shot to
I
get
mean,
with
and
him,
of course,
then,
you knew that the people who will come in later and start doing the insurgency, but the conventional.
What time is it now?
I'm not doing any final questions, so 15, no.
If I was an Iraqi living in Iraq, would I put my life at risk for Saddam? No way.
No.
Thanks.
No.
Not you. What do you do too?
And I also, know, my ex-wife was an Iraqi, and so I got to know a lot of Iraqis through that. And I know that quite a few of the Iraqis who accepted the pitch of the insurgents did so after either them or a member of their family were
Yes.
Gonna have to
victim
go a little bit
of.
to the, this way.
One of the folks that we interviewed.
Don't sit down.
Don't sit down.
We're moving it around just a little bit. Didn't want
You
you
can
to.
have a seat now.
Now, can I,
Yep.
you're gonna do that to me?
He's
Yeah,
gonna
we're not gonna pull the chair out from under you.
I don't like when you do that, and especially when you capture it on film. I don't like
Yeah.
that. The blooper reel. One of the comments that we hear over and over again, and comes out in some of the things, that a lot of what our folks attribute to Islam is really this
Chaplain, can you lean to your left instead of your right? Thanks.
undercurrent of tribalism that pre-exists, the honor code, which is very prevalent. And so it's important that these, our commanders and our soldiers understand that they shouldn't attribute everything to Islam, and that there's these other things going on. And in Iraq, as you know, that there was also a huge piece of socialism that we were dealing with.
But, it's also,
Not matter.
in the same way, if you get the Iraqis, because there's a very strong, again, customs and traditions there, if they see you as their guests, they'll honor you. But, I realize that it's very difficult to convince someone, especially if you're carrying weapons, that you're guests.
Yeah.
But at least, in direct proportion, Qaeda was ultimately, and I think facts speak for themselves, because ultimately when Qaeda alienated many of the tribes of Iraq, that was a trump card in the hands of American forces.
Yeah.
And it's many of the tribes thought that the Qaeda was about the honor of Muslims, and why is it so high? If anyone comes to the United States and is on our territory, there immediately, there's a presumption against them. You know, if we have an occupier on our
Oh,
side,
yeah, sure,
you know,
sure.
there is a presumption against them.
Yeah.
And now, if it turns out that they're actually not here to occupy our land, but to do something, whatever it is, and that actually helps us, they have to overcome that presumption.
Yeah, I think that understanding what was pre-existing was one of our problems. Very difficult to understand because we were being fed some major propaganda by Ahmed Salafi
Yeah.
and others. Anytime you do research and you have only one source of information,
Yeah,
that was-
this, I mean, I had met Ahmed Chalabi in Princeton many years ago.
Right.
And I actually, because at one point I was, you know, I actually was a Bush appointee to that Commission on Religious Freedom, so I knew quite a, afterwards, I felt that we, after the easy conventional war victory, as long as people who at the time mattered a lot, like Rumsfeld and Dennis Ross and so on, they were listening to folks like Ahmed Chalabi and even at times bringing in Fuad Ajami or you know, as their experts and so on. They were, you know, and
I think we're going to have a better approach.
well,
Yeah,
we must. I mean, you know, it sort of it's something as simple. And actually, I remember in a dinner with Dennis Ross.
Mhm.
This was before the invasion. It was after the invasion of Afghanistan, before the invasion of Iraq, and I said that let's remember that you could be nothing in Iran unless you join the Ba'ath Party, and you know you can't
Debathify.
Yeah, and go
But
in-
what did they do? I mean, I was there at that time, and that was huge. And we had to deal with all these unemployed but highly trained ex-soldiers who basically just had to feed their families.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you. I mean, at the time when I said that, made that comment, Akbar Ahmad, you probably heard of,
Mhm.
sort of said something that criticized what I said. You know, Ahmad Rahman has always likes to ingratiate himself to those.
Was Khalilzad there?
Khalil Zada was there as well in that same meeting, and the point I made was completely ignored in the comment made by Dennis Ross and then Khalil Zada as well. It was just completely just marginalized, and I tried during that same meeting to make the same because I knew it's going to be a huge problem. A lot of people who didn't want to fight the United States were not going to look to anyone who's going to put food on the
Yeah.
table of their families,
Yeah, I would.
and it was very hard during the first years to get heard.
Mhm.
Um,
You know, I think that they still, and there's still an element there that would consider the situation as being right, what they did was right. Yeah, I mean, that's just a certain, and these folks are some of the same ones who are trying to, I think, stir up the conflict with Iran.
I mean, as if, and that one will be truly nightmarish. I mean,
I want to be in this uniform.
that would be truly horrific. I mean, Iran is a different ballgame than Iraq or Afghanistan.
I mean, I think that President Obama has been very smart in, as he said, not putting the American fingerprints on this. You know, some would say you need to stand up and encourage the Shia to rebel. But we already have an experience with that back in the uprising of 1991 where we didn't exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the scars from that
Oh.
are very alive.
The scars are very much alive because it was only after 2003 that this all came back when we began to look for the mass graves.
Right, yeah.
It was like for some people that it had happened just yesterday, and it's fresh in their mind. They're still, exhuming bodies now, and every time you exhume a body from someone who's died, they're back. They're coming to grips with the fact that their relatives are dead, and the grieving process just begins now, and the anger.
There was a period where, and this was shortly after 9/11, I must have lectured or spoken or had interviews with every American military, every political or military agency in the United States. DC was sort of like my weekly trip. What I've found and still find, that's why I sort of withdrew quite a bit, very frustrating, is that this very, it should be a very obvious point that you need people who have an intimate, even my point is that people who are actually empathetic to this culture.
Yes.
You cannot deal with people.
No.
You're going in saying we're liberators. So you can't go in advised by people who have a problem with this culture, right?
That's right.
And that just is very simple thing. Like people, what is, why is it that we're going to? This is, you'll find this interesting. There was at a point there was whether if the issue comes up, whether I don't remember who it was. I believe it was Cheney, who would say that we leave open the option of using weapons of mass destruction against the Iraqis.
Yeah.
And at the time, I wrote a very strong memo saying, do not do that.
I remember because I was, I'll tell you the circumstances of that. When we were going, this was shortly after the invasion, but it was before the fall of Saddam Hussein. That was that very short period. And we were considering that we were going to get either hit with chemical weapons, especially when we went through Karbala, that area of Karbala Gap, or some kind of WMD. And that was a great fear. We were living in our protective suits. And I remember that comment that they said, if they did that, we would not take the option off the table of retaliating in some sort of.
And my position, which I feel is that, the argument was, and this is that, the argument was that, we need this as
Getting your arm.
Right.
It's still going there.
But my thing was that if you really have to, I think there was a lot of difficulty believing that the conventional warfare was going to be what it was. Getting people to actually believe that the Iraqi army was going to collapse internally, and it was something that
It's fun to play with that one.
frankly, people like Pipes and Anderson who are also constantly going to these people who are saying no, they hate you, they fund you, they can't, Saddam, religion, Saddam is like lefty, it's really you can imagine the position I was in. I would be pulling my hair out as I'm listening to this. I remember one time we were CIA and Emerson was going off. Chairman Emerson, he's not a scholar. He doesn't even know Arabic well.
Emerson?
Yeah, Steve Emerson. And he was going on about how Saddam Hussein could be the man.
I can't. You know, how many
in that
items?
briefing, and
These are all,
he said how
I need to take about 3 of them. The whole box, this is Virginia when I come next week. All
don't
right.
think you're going to go there and find
take the
people
whole
who
box.
live in the medieval world. These people had some of the best science universities, some of the best hospitals, some of the, actually Iraq was one of the
We
most
went to the
developed
studio in the street
countries
for
in the
6
world.
days.
And so they are
Where
smart.
he shows us what
And
he's done.
if
Very
they,
literate talk show.
and
With the host and
and if
chaplain,
they feel
cutting all the
that
interview segments.
you
So we have to shoot all that too and do all the
repeating
editing.
the stereotypes or no because
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
you're underlying I am happy that
Come on, here you go.
I find more,
This project for the
I mean, I am not being invited to DC as much as I used to.
but they can
But
copy, you can request copies.
when
of
I
everything.
I'm
It's owned by
finding more
American
people
Public,
who
basically.
agree with me, or who at least are willing to listen than I used to.
Well, you know, I think that, given the times that we're living now, there's more, I think that kind of privilege, since we tried that.
Yeah.
My good one.
I have it. Thank you very
The
much.
only thing that I'm thinking now is we're going to
You know,
try to do what we did.
I'm sure the chaplain's keeping track of it, and has to make copies of all these for us. So maybe if you like enough time, run by
And now some of it will go into your case,
Sure.
but there's many.
I don't think you did, no.
Well, very different. Very different.
You knew that, right?
We haven't sent anything there yet.
Oh, is that right?
No, I know the temptation
Like
to
standing in line.
sort of just say, it's one and the same.
Yeah,
All these people
generalize
are
it.
X and Y. It was disastrous. Disastrous.
And my deal.
You know, and I would say that it's,
Thank
I,
you.
Yeah, thank you.
I used to, you know, Islam doesn't have a sort of a priesthood tradition, as you know, and